Back with another video. This video is going to be looking at how a 10-man Chelsea ruined Tuchel's undefeated run in the Premier League to a West Brom side that has been struggling and needs wins at the moment. So before we start, take a look in the description below to find the link for Keyframe. If you guys are interested in making content like this, the link's there. And if you want exclusive PowerPoint, tactical information, and updates, become a member. A lot of cool stuff is happening with the channel, so get your input in there and unlock a lot of exclusive content. But let's get to it. So when Chelsea went down to 10 men, they pretty much played in a 4-4-1 or a 4-2-3. So they lost the three central defenders and the wing backs. So what this meant was Timo Werner primarily played more centrally, with Jorginho and Kovacic as the two pivots underneath them, with then Reece James coming into the team as well. And what this did was it allowed more comfortable circulation for West Brom, and it allowed horizontal progression to occur. So what this means is with West Brom, with them creating double width in the wide areas with wingers or more advanced wide players and fullbacks, they were allowed to circulate the ball more freely because of the lone striker from Chelsea and the middle players being occupied by the three central midfielders of West Brom. So from here, circulation was almost guaranteed, and the delayed wide press of Chelsea, because of the lack of influence in the wide areas due to the loss of the wing backs in their back four system, they were now conceding more space in front of the ball, in front of their block, and in the wider areas. So what happened was, when the ball would be shifted, there would then be lots of space on the weak side for then West Brom to exploit. And as we see, the occupation of space, and especially with Marcos Alonso here, he's the key player. He's now a fullback and having to jump all the way up to the West Brom fullback. This movement was quickly eliminated from the Chelsea pressing or the Chelsea defensive structures and mechanisms in their team. And then we also have the double pivot, as we see here, Kovacic and Jorginho. They'd be moving very far to one side, as well as Pulisic and Timo Werner being dragged to one side, leaving vacant players from West Brom on the weak side. So, as we see here, as West Brom circulate play, they have dual width, giving them more freedom to then make runs off of each other, as well as the player, the forward, the central striker, coming to the ball side to then look to make runs in behind the Chelsea back four. And with this, the fullbacks from Chelsea are now jumping to then get involved with the play, as we see Azpilicueta becomes the right fullback. He jumps to press the winger and concede space in behind, which can then be accessed via the central forward's wide run, and then displacing one of the two central defenders with adequate numbers behind the ball to then try and nullify any Chelsea transitions, whereas when they went 10 men down, Chelsea had a lot of opportunity when the game initially stretched, but after they went 2 goals down, halftime came, and then the struggles continued. So here, when Chelsea were in possession, one of the movements they tried was with their double pivot. They tried to drop one of the pivots alongside the central defenders, and now Jorginho would then leave Kovacic as the single pivot, and this only happened a few times in the first half, right after the 10-man was commenced. But then, as we see in the wide areas, the occupation was quite deep, and there was no height within the team. And as we see Reece James as well, the third midfielder, playing a little bit deeper and thus making it comfortable for West Brom to then press and control where the ball was going to be circulated with a lot of vacant key areas. And the key areas that are vacant are very crucial to how Chelsea played. And when Chelsea didn't build up like this, we can also see their team now with both pivots and even the third midfielder of Reece James coming into the second line of the build-up. We have our two central defenders, and what they tried to do here is they tried staggering the first and second line, which is pretty much to create more diagonal passing options, making it harder to defend, as we see. So they have all diagonal passing options from the first or second line, but as we see with the two forwards of West Brom, and then the four midfielders in behind them, which we can only see three of them here, but this made it very easy for West Brom to control these three midfielders, and with the lack of width and height from Chelsea, they had no outlet and direct threat in behind to then skip the pressure of West Brom, so they had to force and play through when they didn't have the available options. And with a comfortable numerical superior back line of West Brom, they were very comfortable defending when Chelsea had possession. So here, again, West Brom in possession, and we start to see the clear 4-4-1 shape that Chelsea adopted when they went the man down. And it wasn't so much that West Brom had great shape, it was just that they were able to exploit Chelsea's weaknesses, especially when Chelsea had the ball, and take advantage of this. But playing with wide fullbacks emphasized the space between the lines that was left by a 10-man Chelsea, and by playing with the deep fullbacks, the wingers then had more freedom, and the midfielders as well had a more open midfield to then play through. And with three primarily central midfielders, numerical superiority was able to be made if they were able to find it. If not, horizontal progression was pretty much always an option, or the direct route in behind and then getting numbers around the ball. So here, the two goals in the first half, actually, one stemmed from the build-up, that was the second, but this one really had nothing to do with Chelsea being down to 10 men. It was just basic stepping principles as a defender, which they just failed. So the Matheus Pereira scores the goal. We see him clearly on sides and very deep in terms of his positioning, where in relation to the Chelsea back four, as we see highlighting here, the Chelsea back four. And the first problem comes with their hips and how they are faced. So when they're stepping forward, all their momentum and their orientation is they have flat hips towards the ball moving forward, whereas if they were more angled and they lowered their center of gravity a little bit, but pretty much if they angled their hips sideways, their orientation changed, they would then be able to have more vertical mobility and be able to drop and react quicker to the threat of the long pass that we see the goalkeeper playing here. But nothing to do with the numerical disadvantage that Chelsea were under, all to do with just stepping basic principles of play. And so then we see where Matheus Pereira started back here. He then clearly gets goal side of all the players and finishes with a lobbed finish. And now the second goal happens when Chelsea are in possession. The play is forced into the Chelsea wide player, Azpilicueta, who's usually the fullback in a back four, but with Christensen jumping up, the goalkeeper splits the Chelsea players, and we have Zuma now creating the back three with the goalkeeper and Azpilicueta. Christensen occupies the central corridor in kind of a makeshift phase of possession, and now not only are they able to adequately cut possession off to one side, the player now, one of the Little details that we have to think about is the pressing run from the wide player and how he's no longer pressing a wingback but pressing a central defender, and his run can then be much more straight and much more direct, cutting down the time it takes him to get to the player he is pressing. And with the vacant wide area due to the lack of wingbacks, he has less to worry about with his cover shadow, initially making the direct run to press more of his priority and the intensity at which he does this. And behind him, he also has the numerical advantage and has adequate cover, as we see here. Just in the center of the field, they match up with the two makeshift double pivots, and with Kovacic and Reece James higher, they are also being able to be man-marked, thus taking away any numerical superiority threat. Their numerical advantage comes through Zuma, but with the cutting of the field, this quickly becomes irrelevant. So with players around the ball, then we start to see where the width comes from with Reece James as their only outlet, and we see the player pressing from West Brom. Then first he gets to the ball, but then he adjusts his positioning to then use his cover shadow slightly to then take away this wide area option, and we see from West Brom matching up man for man in their pressing phase to emphasize their numerical advantage with adequate cover across the field, and even to Reece James, who will then get the ball, but we'll see how the reaction of West Brom is key for them to score their second goal. So from here, Reece James gets the ball with a poor field of view. His field of view is into the back corner in his own half, and West Brom are able to get numbers around the ball, two players back pressing, isolating the players of Chelsea in possession, and then they also have adequate structure and cover, as we see Kyle Barkley even jumping because there is no more threat in behind, and they have cover through their second central defender, so they're able to create this structure around the ball to then, when they win it, transition fast, or if Chelsea manage to escape with a first line pass, the West Brom players are right there to press the ball and win it back. So now, when the ball finds itself to Matheus Pereira, just worth noting his composure in the box to take the Chelsea players one way, using their momentum against them as they're all going towards the ball and lunging in to block the shot. He has the awareness to simply fake the shot, go around them, and then pass it between them for a good finish to give them the 2-1 lead, which really shapes the second half, and West Brom are able to exploit Chelsea in key areas. So that's the analysis, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.